Broadcasting from the Bryant neighborhood on the historic Black South Side of Minneapolis. Welcome to People Power.
Welcome to People Power, speaking truth to power by bringing you voices from the grassroots. My name is Marjaan, I'm your host, and thank you for joining me for a brand new episode. Today I have an excellent interview with activist and co-founder of Communities United Against Police Brutality, Michelle Gross, coming to you shortly. This past January 6th was the second anniversary of the attempted coup d'etat at the U.S. Capitol by a mob of hundreds of domestic terrorists. It was also the 13-year anniversary of the heinous triple homicide at the Seward Market in South Minneapolis. On January 6, 2010, Osman Elmi, Anwar Muhammad, and Muhammad Warfa were all murdered in cold blood during a robbery at the Seward Market convenience store. Mahdi Ali was charged with being the triggerman in what turned out to be the city's crime of the decade. Ali faced 2 counts of murder for each man killed and was ultimately convicted on first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder and given a 90-year sentence. Ahmed Ali was also convicted of felony murder for his role as an accomplice, but he was freed last summer after serving 12 years in prison. I came across this case in 2020 when I began my investigation into Target Corporation's massive surveillance program in partnership with law enforcement agencies. I read a Minnesota Public Radio story that struck me how it described Target's involvement in this case. The article was about Target's state-of-the-art forensics lab that the retailer uses to help police and federal law enforcement solve crimes. It focused on Target's forensics analyst, Jacob Steinhauer, who testified against Mahdi during his trial for the triple homicide case. Quote, Steinhauer testified that the pants in the video appeared to be similar to a pair of jeans police seized from Ali's apartment days after the shooting, end quote. However, that's not Target's only ties to the case. For decades, Target has funded the Hennepin County Attorney's Office along with the Minneapolis Police Department. And as I researched Mahdi's case, I discovered none of that was disclosed during trial. It was clear to me that this 15-year-old kid who was tried and convicted for a triple homicide that he has always maintained he did not commit, did not receive a fair trial. The more I dug into his case, the more it appeared that he did not commit these murders. And last summer, Mahdi's co-defendant and accomplice in the robbery told Fox 9 News that he lied about Mahdi being involved in the killings and that Mahdi is innocent. Here's my interview with Michelle Gross, who explains how she got involved in the case, why she believes Mahdi is innocent, and the entire local criminal justice system is corrupt and obsessed with locking up black men.
My name is Michelle Gross, and I am the president of Communities United Against Police Brutality. I'm also a paralegal working with civil rights attorneys here in the Twin Cities.
And can you tell us, how did you get involved in Mahdi Ali's case?
Mahdi came to us through one of the attorneys that I work with, and we began to just talk, as I normally do with all of our clients. And bit by bit, I came to know him as somebody with a lot of integrity, someone who does a lot of things in the prison system to help other people, and also just as a real good guy. I mean, he began to tell me a story, and I began to understand the need to really try to work toward his freedom.
So it sounds like you believe he's innocent.
I absolutely believe he's innocent. I think his case is very akin to the case of Mahdi Ali, who would have had an exonerating video had the police bothered to capture it, and it's the same type of situation here. And it also akin to the Mahdi Ali case. A witness who, made a false identification and then later backtracked.
So as you know, Mahdi said he had an alibi, that he was, at the hospital, I believe, when the shooting occurred. And there was surveillance video from the university hospital that could have exonerated him, but was never introduced into his trial. And so do you know, is that video accessible today? Is it still around?
We're trying to find out the location of that video. We believe it does exist, but we just don't know where it is. So, and there are a number of people working on that exact question. So, like I said, I believe it exists. I believe the police have it actually, but they haven't identified it, and we haven't been able to find out for certain that they do. Mahdi was a person who was easily victimized and dragged into this situation. He was brought over here by, essentially he was bought by some people to be able to bring them over here, to justify them coming over here because they needed a kid to bring with them.
Essentially, he was trafficked.
Right. He was trafficked. I mean, not essentially, he was. He was trafficked for his ability to get these people into the country with a child. And because that was what you needed at the time. And he was then left to his own devices to survive. The people made no efforts to ensure that he was safe or that he had a place to live even. They basically brought him here to the U.S. so that they could get in the U.S. And then they just sort of dropped him in the street and said, okay, you're on your own. And this was like, when he was like 14, 15 years old. And this kid was, literally living in the street. 14 and 15-year-olds don't have good ways to access food and housing and all of that stuff. So this kid was just living in the streets, surviving the best he could. He had a pretty significant marijuana habit, wasn't making great decisions. And at that age, what kid does, frankly. But he was a kid that was kind of just a street kid, and he was an easy target for the police to be able to put charges on, and it made it easy to name him, for someone who wanted to protect a family member. You look around and think, who can you grab to say? And this was somebody that knew Mahdi and was able to, essentially latch onto him and use him as the fall guy. So then this individual did that, and then he has long admitted, I shouldn't say long admitted. He's admitted now, as he got closer to his release, and as his cousin who was involved died, that in fact he had just sort of picked Mahdi out of the crowd basically to put this on. And then at that point, when the charges came, he was a 15-year-old kid when these charges came. The judge manipulated to try to make him older so that they could charge him as an adult. But that's part of the really depraved kind of prosecution that this was. And I want to mention that the judge involved is the very same judge that prosecuted, was the judge in the Derek Chauvin trial. That's Pete Cahill, who used to be a city attorney, a Minneapolis city attorney back in the day, and used to go after people all the time that got brutalized by the police. So I don't have much love for that guy at all. And the upshot is that he again manipulated to attempt to make Mahdi be able to stand as an adult. Then he manipulated again because after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that you cannot give juveniles life without parole, he instead changed the sentence to 3 consecutive 30-year sentences, which is the functional equivalent of a life sentence. When you go into prison at age 15 or 16 and you get 90 years, you're not going to survive that. There's no reasonable expectation that you'll ever get out of the prison in that time period. So again, he just manipulated the situation, and it's almost hard to fathom why he has so much animus against Mahdi Ali specifically.
Really, really great points. That was another question I had regarding this case about the judge, Judge Cahill. and it came out a year ago that he signed off on the search warrant that led to the killing of Amir Locke and
that's right.
More protests. And so I did a piece about him a year ago after a lot of disturbing facts have come out about his record. And so I know he worked under Amy Klobuchar when she was county prosecutor. And the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office then and now has been heavily funded by Target Corporation.
Yes,
and,
that's right.
And Mahdi's, his case was really his conviction, in many ways was the result of Target Corporation's role in it. So, for example, they paid a forensic specialist to testify against Mahdi and do an analysis of the surveillance video, saying that, the pants in the video matched the pants that the cops found at his home. But additionally, the Target Corporation was funding the police back then, and they still are today. And they have been heavily funding the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office, where Peter Cahill previously worked before becoming a judge. Right. So
that's exactly right. Yep. Yeah, he has a long history of these bizarre, prosecutorial roles. Like I said, he was a city attorney, then he became a Hennepin County prosecutor, and he was very heavily vested in, and as all prosecutors are, in making sure that their charges stick and that kind of stuff. And then he becomes a judge, and he's still got that prosecutorial mindset. We got to get these guys, we got to put them away, and all of this kind of stuff.
Right. Rather than being neutral like judges should be. Right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so what I found out in my research, I've been investigating Target for 2 years now, and none of that was disclosed in Mahdi's trial, that Target was also behind the scenes funding the prosecution, funding police.
I certainly think it shows the heavy footprint of Target on this case, and the fact that it was not disclosed, the prosecution has a duty to disclose all exculpatory matters, all kinds of things that talk about any outside involvement, things like that. All of that should have been disclosed. And the fact that it wasn't, and the fact that this was sort of the routine way these folks operated in these cases, it sort of helps to explain why during the tenure of Klobuchar and then Mike Freeman, the jails and prisons in this state became the blackest places in the whole damn state. Certainly explains it.
Right. And another thing you mentioned was the co-defendant who was also convicted with Mahdi. His name is Ahmed Ali. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes. One of the things that over the years, I think this young man, he was attempting to protect another family member. And after that family member died, I think he then felt like he could be free to say what the real truth was. And he began to let us know that he wanted to say the real truth. Interestingly, a reporter spoke to him first, and he made an on-camera confession that he had lied about Mahdi being involved. Unfortunately, however, at the time that he made this confession, we prepared for him a document for him to sign to put that in writing, but we were not able to, because of COVID, meet with him face to face, and he got away from us, and we haven't been able to locate him since. So
can you walk us through the process of getting Mahdi's case reviewed? Is that happening?
His case is being reviewed. I'm, being the paralegal for the attorney that's doing that work, I'm not able to really talk about it in detail, but I can just tell you that it's an exhaustive process. It's a process of going through everything with a fine-tooth comb, looking for those areas where there could be a challenge to the legality of the prosecution, a challenge to the sentencing. It's like I said, I can't go into the detail of what exactly is being looked at, but we are looking, no stone will be left unturned. So it's a really important and a very detailed and exhaustive process of just literally, and the lawyer, I think, starts at the high level and says, okay, what kinds of legal procedures are, need to be looked at. And then it just kind of goes from there and starts to look at all the evidence. We are doing a lot of work on the evidence issues, things like that.
Okay. And is this review, is it going through Attorney General Keith Ellison's office? Or?
No, this is not. This is a private attorney. Part of the reason is that we frankly haven't seen anything come out of that process that Ellison's office is doing yet. We haven't seen any results from that process. We know that his office, that conviction integrity unit or conviction review unit. I can't recall what they're exactly calling it, but we know that office, for example, has been looking at the Maya Burrell case for like a year and a half now. We haven't seen anything come out of that. It looked like we would have seen a result by now, and it makes me concerned. Part of what you don't want to do when you don't know if something is going to work or not is to give them all your stuff and hope for it. You better, especially in a case that's this high profile and that's this complex, it's better that he has somebody that he has hired that he knows is working for him than to give it into some process that we don't know is going to really work.
Okay. All right. So now, the attorneys, you said private attorneys are reviewing this case. And so what would be the next steps? Would they go to the appeals court or the Minnesota Supreme Court?
No, this would be a post-conviction action. And so post-conviction actions look different. And I haven't been through a lot of those, to be honest with you, with this attorney that I'm working for. He, and I'll say his name is Zorislav Lederman, and he does a lot of post-convictions and has a very high rate of success. And so he's a good guy to be working on this stuff. I don't actually know the real process of it, other than once he finds, areas that can actually be the basis for an appeal of the case. I don't know if it goes back into I think it probably goes back into the district court at that point, but I don't want to swear on that because it's not a process I've really been through.
Okay. So if it does go back to the district court, then does that mean the new Hennepin County prosecutor, Mary Moriarty, would be reviewing this case? Yes,
I believe so. I think that is what would happen. And I know Mary Moriarty pretty well. I absolutely supported her in her election bid, but I've never discussed this case with her or any other case for that matter, because for us to have had that conversation would mean that she would have to recuse herself from the case. So I'm very careful not to discuss specific cases with her in any way. And I think that's something that a lot of people, now I'm talking to a lot of people whose loved ones have been falsely convicted or, who have been overly sentenced and things like that. And they're all wanting to rush in there and have a conversation with her. And I'm trying to explain to them that you need to take it easy, because if we talk to her now, she can't review these cases. We have to figure out how to address these cases with her that don't involve a way that would force her to recuse herself. So this is really important. I can't, in other words, like I said, I supported her election bid. I, gave her some money like, you do when you want to support a candidate. But I certainly have not made any efforts to influence her in her reviews of things, because again, you're going to blow it if you do.
Excellent point. I just wanted to kind of go back to a major detail of Mahdi being trafficked as a kid, who he grew up in a refugee camp in Kenya. His family fled the civil war in Somalia, and he was brought to the U.S. without permission from his parents, without anybody knowing. Right. And that seems like a major detail that was not discussed, not disclosed in his original trial. Why do you think that was? Why was that detail left out of his trial, and how do you think it will impact the review of this case?
I think that detail was left out because there was the whole question about his age, and the people that wanted to see this prosecution go through successfully needed to make sure he was old enough to be charged as an adult. So that was important to them, to make sure to cover up the fact that he was actually younger than what, I mean, God, you could look at him until he was it was a kid, for God's sakes. But they wanted him to be an adult so badly that they did not want any of that business to come out in the courts because, frankly, like I said, they needed him to be a certain age. And so they made sure that they kept things out that would have conflicted with that. So I think that's a big deal. I do think that may be one of the elements that gets looked at as part of this review. It's not the only one by a long shot, because the bottom line is not just to prove that they shouldn't have prosecuted him as an adult. The bottom line is to prove that he didn't do it. So it's only going to be one factor. The other thing that I think really needs to happen in this case is not just to sit back and wait for the lawyers, but to do some political, work around this case to make people aware of it in the community, to do some outreach. There are a lot of people that are rightfully angry about the incident that occurred, very rightfully angry. I don't want to minimize that in any way. When what was it, 3 people's lives were taken in a extremely violent manner over, money. I mean, come on, right? Of course, people are super angry about that. They have every right to be, and the community was harmed and affected by this. So we don't want to minimize that part of it, right? We want to recognize that at the same time, and so that has made the individuals that were a part of that thing, or that were at least perceived to be part of it, it's made them pariahs in the community. And so, there's a lot of people, like when I started doing some work on this case politically, that were coming to me and saying, you're full of it, you're wrong, saying really some hateful stuff to me, frankly, there's going to be some people that no matter what, you're never going to convince them that this guy's innocent, right? But there's a need to, he's not a sympathetic person when people believe he did it, okay? So there's a need to help people recognize that he didn't do it, and also to get him reintegrated into his community. Because, if, let's say, all the best things line up the right way and we are able to get him exonerated, show that he didn't actually do it, he would still have to find a way to make himself welcome in his community. And so that's part of the work that should be happening right now, not just waiting until the lawyers do their thing. Helping people understand, helping build a demand for a review of this case, a meaningful review that is going to show his innocence. And if we just wait for the lawyers and then it goes to court and it's all this legalistic stuff, that's not going to happen. We've really got to do the other pieces of this.
Those are really important points. Any last thoughts about this case before I let you go?
Well, I think that this case, like I said, the crime that happened was an atrocious crime, a really horrible crime. It was a mass shooting. It was horrible. It shouldn't have happened. But we can't allow innocent people to go to prison for things that they didn't do. That's just not ever acceptable in a decent society. And so this is an important case for that reason. But more than that, it connects to all the other cases where, provably innocent people were sent to prison during sort of a campaign of terror on Black and brown bodies in this state, or more particularly in this county. We had the Klobuchar era. We had the Freeman era before and after her. And these have been eras where literally the goal was to lock up as many Black and brown bodies as possible. And so I think it's really important to look at that era and recognize that putting innocent people in prison because somehow the optics look right for your reelection campaign or whatever is not a way to make us safer. First of all, when you put innocent people away, guilty people are still in the streets to do this crap again. If people want to feel safe, we've got to address making sure that we put the right people in the prison system. And we also have to address, of course, the prison system itself. It's another whole story. But the bottom line is that, this was an era that was just rife with racism, rife with, lock 'em up mentality. And, we need to rectify that. And more than that, more than anything, is we need to make right what has happened to innocent people who have been put away under this system.
That was my interview with paralegal activist Michelle Gross, co-founder of Communities United Against Police Brutality. For more on Michelle Gross and CUAPB, check out a recent story by Unicorn Riot that I contributed to, detailing their long history fighting for justice in the Twin Cities against corrupt and murderous cops. What Michelle Gross just described is an entire system that is corrupt to its core and has been preying on black men. For more about Mahdi Ali's case, check out Fox 9 News' report from 2021. I have a link to the story in the description of this podcast. And also, there's a link to my story from last year about Judge Cahill describing his pattern of skewing justice against black people, featuring the voices of devastated community members who have grievances with him. Judge Cahill's record needs to be scrutinized because I can assure you that Mahdi Ali is not the only defendant in Cahill's courtroom who did not receive a fair trial. Also, I have a short documentary about Mahdi Ali coming to you soon, so stay tuned for that. If you want to support this work, including my upcoming documentary about Target's massive surveillance program, there's a link to my GoFundMe in the description. A huge thank you to Michelle Gross for speaking with me, and also shout out to Isaac Specktor for audio engineering. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode, and as always, all power to the people who organize. Peace.